motivate people. Who's going to put their hand and say, I'm going to be happier if I'm going to get a pay cut? Or I'm going to be happier if bosses says your pay is going to go up 10%, 15%, and depending on how well you have done, etc. as well. Chances are you'll be happier, and as been said many times, happier workers are more productive workers, which is why I think the last survey we saw last year where Singapore is the least happiest lot, maybe a reason why productivity is so low. Okay, so that's the catch line. Higher wages, higher happiness, and higher productivity. Then the question comes back to, okay, why this and not say minimum wage? For longest of time, I don't believe in minimum wage because Singapore is a full employment economy. Econ 101 says, in a full employment economy, that need for a minimum wage because wages should adjust itself. But because of that valve offer through foreign worker, that opportunity never really came about. Which is why, coming back to the early suggestion of that part-time pool of workers, you can only induce more interest to work part-time if it's attractive enough to work. I think equivalent minimum wage for those part-timer workers have been around that $5, $6, maybe even $7 an hour for as long as I've lived in Singapore itself. That cannot be, because cost of living has gone up. So where I would see perhaps useful, maybe it is only for certain industry that we have minimum wage, or for part-time workers itself, that we induce. So the restaurant who during certain peak period of the day of the week can tap upon that pool of worker to come cope with the demand, etc. as well. Because nobody's going to work for peanuts, and if it's going to be at that $5, $6, $7, while the overall cost of the wages extra has gone up, it will even mean that there will be even less people willing to part-time as well during a period when you really want more part-timers to come in. I think all these schemes at this juncture help full-time worker, but it won't benefit, not to my knowledge, the part-timers as well. So to me, one of the areas perhaps missing is how to get more part-timers to come in. Basically, obviously, you have to pay more, but obviously the pain will be felt by businesses as well, which in turn basically means that you may have to pay more for that bowl of ramen. You only pay $15, versus your $3 wonton noodle, but you're willing to pay the $15. So wonton noodle may have to go up to $5 from this point on, but we're willing to pay because we got the money. So bottom line really is, to me, this is a very innovative way in terms of wage scheme itself to help the lower income of basically those permanent workers themselves, but it doesn't help that other pool itself. Maybe that will be addressed, and that may make it a more complete package in terms of how we can help businesses. But it will mean overall costs will go up until such time as productivity kicks in. It means prices and inflation may be at the elevated level for a little while, and you and I will be in that uncomfortable position where we have slower growth, we have low productivity, high costs, and basically, that will be perhaps the scenario that we may see over the near term until the productivity restructuring start to kick in, that see the benefit in terms of growth and wages being in balance.
The WCS is a part of this quality growth program that has 4 trusts. It's actually very thoughtful. First, just now the first segment we talked about the pain of the foreign workers, etc. So with that pain, a lot of companies were then saying it's very difficult for them to actually pay for higher wage, and because you're bleeding and all the rest. So this part of the WCS actually helped to patch the part and motivate companies to say, I think government is co-sharing the increment. There's no reason why you should not increase the lower wage. And within this whole quality growth program, they had a third part, actually the PIC bonus, and also they recognize productivity itself is not about a single company, but to actually grow the whole Singapore productivity increment, you actually have to draw in the whole value chain, the whole industry, supply chain has to be actually increased. So it's actually very thoughtful. It has 4 trusts to that. WCS being, I think, one of the most innovative, if you actually look around global scene, you rarely see government co-sharing the part of salary. By itself, I think it does one thing, is it tries to motivate, because in this case, the first case was is a stick issue to ensure that if you actually hire foreign workers, now you're going to pay a lot more, right? So the increase is a lot. And this carrot part of this is say WCS, if you hire the local and you give them increment, I co-share the 40%. So it's actually shepherding businesses to say, go and hire the local, which is good, right? And anyway, in a very tight labor market, if you don't increase, your workforce will actually start hopping around or lead to another company or a competitor. So therefore, it's part of the operational cost too. If you don't increase, they'll run away. So therefore, you have to actually increase. So it is very thoughtful by itself. Some of the feedback we heard from the ground, the progressive companies say that just in time, since I need to increase, I'm more than happy to do that. I think that's the issue about businesses. There are some of them who looks at half a glass empty, some who looks at half a glass full. Those who looks at half a glass empty came this way, and I think because the announcement is quite broadly made, and I think even just now Wu Hong was saying that some of the accountants even bring their employers here, and the message is actually very loud to the individual workers that government is co-sharing an increment. So that put the employers to a certain situation that some of them went to the employers and say, hey, they are co-sharing, are you passing down this 40% to me? And I think that by itself, it sent a different messaging. And that's where I think Wu Hong was then saying, is that a cut before the horse? You have to give the increment before the productivity is arrived. In a normal circumstance, businesses will have to be, you're productive, you have margin, you have profit, co-share, better increment, and therefore a virtuous cycle from there. In this case, I think some of the businesses who are not doing well see in that light. But I think we actually conducted a budget briefing with the MOM, MTI, MOF. And the way how they phrase it is, it's not mandatory. If you can't afford it, don't increase. This is not mandatory. But of course, you do not benefit from any of the 40% supplements. So it actually mobilized behavior, it actually incentivized a certain way, and they want to ensure there are more locals. And provided there are more locals who can rejoin the workforce.
Okay, my perspective of it is very simple. I think there is a certain mistrust between I can sense between the employer and the employee where which credit is concerned. Okay, so you've asked the employees, I've talked to a few employees who say, oh, will the boss just give me a normal increment and then pocket the 40%? Then you ask the employer will say that, oh, the expectation of the staff is that, now I have to give him a higher increment. I would like to think that all bosses wants to run good companies. Okay, I think wants to run good company. So there is a need to actually know how you want to use which credit. I think this part the government cannot tell you how to do it. Okay, and you need to put in place a plan to actually look at how you want to raise your productivity. Communicate that to your workers. They are clear what matrix they are being measured on and how the increment is going to come about. Rather than the employee looks at his pay slip at the end of a year or month and said, hey, how come there's no increase? So I think there's a lot that the company needs to do at the company level, which is very hard for government to dictate. Okay, so this is where MOF's point is, yeah, it's not mandatory. You really have to adapt to your circumstances. Okay, you have to design your productivity metrics and measurement. What are you going to do? How are you going to do it? And then how are you going to share the productivity gain with your employees? And I believe that good companies would have this plan, execution, and communicate, so that everybody is on the same page.
Okay, I will have one last question for the panel before I open to the floor. I think the assumption is that more people, more questions, so I have to leave aside more time for you to ask questions. Okay, one last question I have for the panel is that to bridge the income gap. This year we introduced something new, the progressive tax, in terms of taxing the wealthy who have luxury cars, the rich who have a bigger house, in terms of higher property taxes. Do you think that this will go down well with the rich? And do you think we should do more going forward? Or do you think that we will see more of this going forward? Anyone can answer this.
Okay, I must admit I was the first one to say it's a Robin Hood tax that we've got. Well, I suppose if you ask those in the group that are being taxed more, it is a Robin Hood tax, because really, if you look at it, when you have mentioned tax, very brave of us to do so, and was talking some opposition from economic advisor from the Malaysian side, because their election is coming, and they said, wow, Singapore do, I think we should also follow. So I think this is something which is we probably will see around the region, because the increasing wealth here as a result of growth presents such an opportunity which others may not be able to do so, as we pointed out in the Europe or in the US itself. And the good thing is, because the wealth are still being created, chances are the wealthy people who may complain a little bit more will still stay and pay, because they still make most of their money still here as well. So again, in terms of timing, it's probably good that, and perhaps also morally right, that the wealthier do a bit more. Yes, they're already contributing in part to the tax collection. Although we're saying government pay for all these, actually it's you and I. We all contributed to the tax base, and it's you and I's money that are being used to fund all these schemes, etc. As well. So it's perhaps only fair that those who have the mean therefore contribute more. After all, this is the country, this is the region that contributes to them creating the wealth. So I would say it's probably fair. Would it narrow the income gap? Perhaps not, unless we see a significant lift in the income of the lower wages itself. I see more of a gradual process than a great leap. It's more, at this juncture, more about narrowing, not less about narrowing, but preventing it from accelerating. All these schemes that are being introduced and proposed will certainly help, I think, in terms of maintaining the Gini coefficient from running away. And that's probably about it at this juncture. What the government isn't going to do is make it so prohibitive that the wealthy or the well-heeled will all run away from Singapore itself. And as been pointed out, Singapore remains a very attractive place for families to want to come and live here as well. So again, this perhaps their part are being seen as well. As for many of the businesses who have the wealthier boss that can participate and contribute more, I suppose again it is fair in terms of what we are seeing. There is fairer system now, and that system perhaps that we are doing here, more progressive taxes, will be adopted, and we will probably not see the end of it here in Singapore as well.
Okay.
Well, I've been dealing and advising clients on taxes for the last 30 years or so, and I can guarantee none of my clients ever told me, my tax rates are too low. They always say that taxes are very high, because every dollar of tax is $1 too many. Honestly, but in a broader perspective, if you look at our tax rates are very low, right? You do not hit 20% until your chargeable income is more than 320,000. So even at 320,000, your average rate of tax is below 14%. Very, very low. So how much lower can we go? Of course we can go lower, but when we go lower for income tax, corporate tax, GST has to go up. And GST affects the lower income group a lot more than the well-off. So I was quite surprised to hear Taman talking about GST being regressive last year. That was the first time the government actually said GST was regressive after 14 years. But GST is very regressive. So it's not good if we lower income tax rate from 20% to 17% and then increase GST, because GST will hit the poor people, and the poor people don't pay tax. So not only are you not benefiting them, you are saying, well, I want to encourage more rich people to come, but to encourage them to come, sorry, poor people pay more tax. That is not a sustainable policy. So I agree with Sing Woon. we have to make sure our Gini coefficient doesn't go up. In fact, our Gini coefficient is very, very high.
All right. Okay. I think we have heard enough from the panel. Is there some burning questions you want to ask? There are mics standing there, both sides of the room.
I would be interested to know how productive we can become in auditing or accounting. If I were in F&B, I could think of automated dishwashers or pre-cut meats, etc. But I think over the years, I've been around for a while, probably as long as the professor or even longer. I think accounting, auditing, or probably more auditing would probably qualify as the most unproductive sector. Now why I'm saying this is because we get auditors working without seeing sunrise, without seeing sunset, without seeing Saturdays, without seeing Sundays, without seeing public holidays. And it gets worse and worse every year. I wonder why nobody talks about it. And I'm not sure whether this is the right forum for me to raise this, and I hope somebody will bring it up to the right authorities. But I do see Professor Sami Lung, whom I know. I don't know whether he knows me or remembers me, but he's a professor of accounting practice. So I'm really looking towards some areas where somebody can come and say, hey, you guys, this is the way to do audit. Fast, highly productive. You have 10 workers, I'll reduce it to 8 or 5. And we don't. Because of the increasing requirements, thanks to Accra, thanks to all the Enron and all the other things that happen in the world, the emphasis on poor guys like us. Now, I used to work in a big practice. I used to work in Pricewaterhouse before. I'm sure they too are facing the same problems as me. And now to make matters worse, the minister says, okay, now we're going to cut the foreign worker quotas. Now where would that put us into? There's an irony. Now we have to pay more to employment pass holders. Okay, we'll pay. But we are not going to get Singaporeans to come and work. Because firstly, there aren't any. And even if they do come, they're not going to work as long as the Singapore workers or as the foreign workers. It's a fact. Clients are chasing you for deadlines. If you are auditing listed companies, God helps you. Okay, or if you are small practitioners like us, we still have to look over our shoulders to see, whether all the working papers are in order, all the questionnaires are answered, and every year these questionnaires keep increasing, and whether we can pass Accra's reviews, which comes as a standard template. So really, I'm looking at a situation where we are in a different industry. It is not fair. Neither is it right to apply the same rules that